Hey guys, welcome back to the final week of JBS. As per usual, we've got in a special guest to discuss the term's topic, which this term was genre. And so we've got a special guest here. Who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? Such an existential question. I am Mike Dicker, and currently apart from being a father and a husband, I am the Dean of Students at YouthWorks College, lecture mostly in New Testament studies, but also some young adults ministry at the moment and some youth ministry online and different places.
Yeah, awesome. And so this term over at Wilforce, we've kind of been looking at genre and all the different kind of genres that are in the Bible. But it's really helpful to kind of just take a step back and kind of just go back to basics every now and then. So in your own words, what is genre?
Well, I think genre is the way you identify what you're reading. So often this is the sort of thing we do without actually consciously thinking of what we're reading. You know, you kind of recognise a poem when you read one, or a satire, or something which is like a science document. And all those kinds of things are genres. And to be honest, I think there's actually probably lots of different labels of genres. But genres are a way of identifying what something is in the wild, so you know how to interact with it and how to treat it.
Yeah, awesome. And so when we kind of think about kind of the biblical genres, the genres that are found in the Bible, do you think it matters at all if we identify what we're reading or what kind of genre it belongs to?
Absolutely. I reckon, in fact, the most important question you can ask as you approach anything in the Bible is, what am I reading? Right? That's the first and most basic question. Because some people think the Bible is just one genre, as if like the Bible it's all the same. It's just one Bible genre thing. But of course the Bible is made up of 66 books, 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New, and they're all different types of books which are in different genres. So letters, is a type of genre. The New Testament is mostly letters, and then you've got the Gospels. Gospels are a kind of a genre of their own, but they're based on first century types of genres like biography and historiography. And then you've got other things as well in the Old Testament, where you've got the Psalms, which are songs and prayers and poems. And you've got kind of accounting, and you've got treaty documents, and you've got primeval narrative, so stories, all kinds of things. And if you don't understand what it is you're reading, you're very likely then to not get it right when you read it, because you won't understand, I guess, the rules of what you're reading. And I think we do this kind of instinctively, so that if you're reading a poem, is my favourite example, roses are red, violets are blue, honey is sweet, and so are you. Instinctively, you work out that's a poem and you understand what it means. I'm trying to tell you how much I like you and compare you to beautiful things, right? So that you understand how beautiful you are, and you are, Hayden. But if you were to misunderstand that genre and think that's not a poem, that's like a scientific document, then you might think that what I'm trying to do is describe to you all the different botanical categories of flowers and plants. At which point, what I've said makes no sense at all, and it's completely stupid, because not all roses are red. Some are white, some are pink, some are multicoloured. Violets aren't blue, they're violet, that's why they're called violets. Honey is sweet, well, some of it is, most of it is, but actually you can get bitter honey, and so are you. Well, I'm not a cannibal, how do I even know what you taste like? And so that's kind of a really dumb description, and if you just misunderstood what I said, they're the kind of questions you'd ask. You'd go, are all roses red? And actually that's the wrong question. The question you need to be asking is, does he like you? That's what the genre does. It tells you, this is not trying to give an infinite explanation of all the different botanical categories. It's just trying to convey poetically how much someone likes you. And that's what genre does. And if you misunderstand that, you ask the wrong questions and you don't quite get the meaning or the purpose of it.
Yeah, fantastic analogy. Yeah, and I think that even in just kind of growing up from kind of babies into infants into kind of children and then into teenagers, we are already encountering a bunch of different genres. Some more frequently than others. Narratives would be a great example of that, right? We're reading that.
Love stories.
We're reading it all over the place, right? We've got fairy tales, bedtime stories. A lot of the Bible is narrative, particularly the Old Testament. And there's all the different fiction stories that are out there nowadays. Ranger's Apprentice was something I grew up with.
Sure. Yeah.
Fantastic, fully narrative. But then we kind of get to some of the things in the Bible that we maybe don't really have quite as much experience in handling. So what are some of the more difficult biblical genres to be reading, in your opinion?
Yeah, and I think, here's also where it's worth saying that some, you might be able to categorize a whole book as a genre. So Paul's letters are letters, and so you can see that with their introduction, which has that kind of classical Greek introduction, tells you who it's from, who's it to, and the occasion, that kind of thing. But even within genres, there can be sections of different genres. So sometimes, like in Philippians, for example, in a letter, there's a hymn in there, there's a song which is about Jesus, or kind of a creedal statement. So, again, you then take those on their, on the rules of reading song and the kind of metaphors that pop up in different things as well. So there are lots of different kind of genres in the Bible, whole books and then subparts of books, different genres. And I think sometimes people make a bit of a mistake with primeval narrative. That's what you'd say Genesis 1 to 12 is. Yeah. So very similar to some of the other cosmologies or cosmogonies of different, the Babylonians, different cultures like the Greeks, explaining how the world came to be, actually more about why the world is the way it is. And I think when people don't understand that one, that can be really difficult for people because they grasp, they think maybe I read it as a science document, but really actually it's got more poetry and more symbolism in it. And then of course I think sometimes people struggle with things like the Psalms, know what to do with a prayer that can be really raw and honest. And Psalm 139, I think it is, maybe 137, about we wept by the cedars of Babylon. I don't think they're cedars. Now I think about it. Anyway, they're people weeping about, and they kind of wish some very horrible things on their enemies. Like, what's this doing in the Bible? But when you realise actually this is a prayer of people that are hurting and hard things are going on for them, then you can kind of understand the place that it's coming from. So there's some of the harder ones that people need to kind of, I think, work a bit at. But then of course there's apocalyptic, which occurs in a few different places, but you'll find the later chapters of Daniel from chapter 7 is apocalyptic, lots of visions, lots of symbolism, some really psychedelic, crazy things going on with different beasts. But you find apocalyptic also pops up in Ezekiel, and some of the prophets have these apocalyptic visions. And then, of course, Revelation is the famous one for the apocalyptic genre. And again, apocalyptic is it's not exclusive to the Bible, because there's a lot of intertestamental writing in between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, about 400 years, where there's a lot of apocalyptic writing and it pops up in different places. But classically, it's kind of defined by lots of imagery and lots of word pictures and visions that go with specific kind of words that recall things from the past and point you to the future. So apocalyptic just means revelation. That's actually why the book of Revelation is called that. It's an apocalypse, rather than thinking the end of the world, which is kind of how we use it. But I think the best analogy for understanding apocalyptic is memes.
Go on.
Yes. So memes have this wonderful. I mean, I feel like I'm not really. Actually, a teenager's probably got more credibility in explaining memes to people. So do take this with a grain of salt. But one of the things I love about memes is the way that words are matched with a particular picture. And so one of the really famous ones is Sean Bean out of The Lord of the Rings. And he does that kind of one does not simply. Right? Now, in order to understand that meme, and it might be all kinds of crazy things kind of people attach to it. One does not simply. You got a favourite one? Well, the original one's what, walk into Mordor, isn't it? But one does not simply, scull a can of Coke or whatever it's going to be. In order to understand what's going on in that, if you've never seen Lord of the Rings and you don't understand that he's saying one does not simply walk into Mordor, then you really don't understand why this phrase, one does not simply, is even there. And you don't understand the picture that goes with it. But there's a whole background to it, and both the words, the phrase, one does not simply, and the picture both inform each other. They belong together and they give you a different meaning for what's going on. Usually trying to display, some kind of humour about something which is difficult, or maybe people think is easy, but actually is difficult. And that's what happens in apocalyptic literature. So typically in Revelation, in the New Testament, you'll get this kind of statement that comes with this vision of maybe a dragon or the Son of Man coming on the clouds. And that's kind of referencing stories that have happened in the Old Testament. And you won't really quite understand what Revelation is saying unless you understand the movie or the background story of the meme, if you know what I mean. And those two things belong together, and they often represent something bigger than itself. So, you know, when you see a picture of Sean Bean saying one does not simply play handball or something, then you know it's not really talking about Sean Bean or Lord of the Rings. It's talking about handball and maybe making fun of people who think it's easy to play handball, rather than the image itself. And the same thing happens in Revelation. You might see a picture of a dragon, and people get hung up about the dragon in Revelation, or the prostitute, or the 10,000 years, or the great millennium, or whatever it's going to be. But often those things are just signs pointing to something else. They're a symbol that's trying to communicate something more than just itself, rather than taking it literally, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So kind of reading Revelation without a good kind of Old Testament background is a bit like skipping straight to Avengers Endgame without watching the rest of the MCU.
That's a good example, right? Or even just coming in halfway through, was it The Ranger's Apprentice?
Yep.
Yeah, right, without any of the backstory, without knowing who these people are and trying to figure out what's going on, yeah. But you can kind of understand, get a basic understanding, I think, of Revelation, as long as you recognise there's a lot of word pictures and poetry and symbolism going on. And not take it too literally, but then you won't get the full enriched meaning of what's going on without the backstory, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And so when we're kind of looking at genres, especially ones that are difficult to read like that, how do we kind of then bring that into kind of a personal context? You know, how does this shape our understanding of the Bible, of God, of Jesus, and Christian living?
Well, I mean, you're going to have to do a little bit of work to make sure you can figure out what you're reading when you come to it. And this is where you get the great blessing of the Christian community. So there are, people that have written commentaries and written books that can help you understand genres and maybe some of the ancient symbolism that you're not familiar with. So that's a great help to you, having read the Bible with a conversation partner in a book, or someone in the flesh. I mean, perhaps reading the Bible with you, and you can bring some of your expertise or things you know to help enlighten things for other people. But in the end, you look out for clues in the text itself. As you're reading the Bible, look in the Bible itself for how it's talking about itself. The good thing about Revelation, it says it's apocalyptic.
Yeah.
That's the first thing it says. This is a vision, right? Which automatically kind of tells you I should read this almost like a dream. Which is, dreams, you were there, but it wasn't you, and I was in this house, but it wasn't this house. That you kind of have that you approach it with that kind of understanding that maybe I should be aware of symbolism and psychedelic things are going to be happening, but what are they pointing to? And you look for clues in the text, like in letters, when it says Paul, an apostle, writing to, then that's what you know it is. And when you're reading the Bible on your own, that's what you should do. And when you're reading the Gospels, like Luke, for instance, he has drawn up an account of the Lord Jesus from eyewitnesses so that you can be certain of the things you're doing. It tells you that the gospel of Jesus, this life of Jesus, is not meant to be made up. It's not a fairy story. This is a historical account of what's going on. So they're the kind of basic things. Look in the text to see what it thinks it's doing. Read it in the same way, rather than trying to impose on it a different point of view. And that'll help you understand the genre and I think get the most out of it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks very much for coming along and sharing your words of wisdom with us. Do you have any final exhortations?
Look, I think keep the memes rolling. That's my great exhortation. I love looking at them. I think there's some really clever stuff going on, and they're one of the great inventions of the internet. So that's my great final exhortation.
Alrighty.
And if you can do that, and also use that kind of medium to bring the truths of the gospel to bear in other people's lives, that's a really creative kind of ministry thing, I think, as well.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you again for coming along. And that's it for this term, guys. I hope you've learned a bunch. And so kind of homework for this week, our final week, so you have the whole holidays to be thinking about this. And then come back to me, first week back from youth group, and I want to know, what is kind of one big takeaway from this whole term? what is one thing that you learn that's going to stick with you and that's going to be present in your mind when you're reading through the Bible on your own. So yeah, let me know during that first week back. Until then, have a good holidays, guys. I hope you enjoy it.
See ya.